Hello, you sentient ball of stardust. My name is Casey Davis. I'm a therapist and I'm an author of the book How to Keep House While Drowning, where I talk about ways to make it a little bit easier to take care of yourself when you're overwhelmed, stressed, have mental health issues, physical health issues, or maybe you're just in a hard season of life. Maybe you're looking for a place that you can come and listen to some practical advice. This is a podcast for all of the self-help rejects. We're going to talk about skills for survival and self-kindness. And I'm going to leave the pop psychology at the door. I promise not to tell you to meditate or to journal. We're just going to give you some really insightful conversations with hopefully some practical advice. So I don't believe you need to pick yourself up by the bootstraps. I don't want you to just try harder, and I don't believe that laziness exists. So join me over on Struggle Care, where we can find compassionate solutions that help us function a little bit better.
Are you struggling to conceive? You have options, and at Piedmont Reproductive Endocrinology Group, we'll make sure you have the guidance and support you need. PREG is known for individualized fertility care that's unique to every patient. We take the time to provide a reassuring and empowering experience because we believe that you deserve nothing less. Let us help you on your journey to parenthood. Visit us at pregonline.com to learn more. Get the guidance and support you need at Piedmont Reproductive Endocrinology Group.
Stoveleg Media, igniting conversation.
Hey y'all, it's me, your girl, Elena Grace, and you are listening to another episode of I've Been Thinking. Welcome, and if this is your first time, thank you for being here. If you are a longtime listener, also thank you for being here. I'm so excited to do this episode today, guys. I do want to preface by saying if my voice sounds weird, I completely lost my voice Saturday night. I went to the UK-Florida football game in Lexington at Kroger Field. But if you know anything, it's forever Commonwealth Stadium. But anyway, I went to that, and it was an absolutely insane time. It was an incredible game. It was the first time in 35 years UK football has beat Florida. Like, it was insane to be there. They stormed the field. Honestly, I wanted to storm the field. Taylor wanted to storm the field, my BFF. But we were like, it's kind of a far jump, and we don't know how to get out. So we're not going to do that. We don't want to hurt ourselves. We're 26. We're a little bit older than a lot of these 19-year-olds storming the field. And then we kind of felt good about it because afterwards we left and we were walking to the bars. And as we're walking down the street, there were some people behind us, and this car pulls up and is like, "Hey guys, y'all going to Stagger? Okay, cool. We'll meet you there. Oh, by the way, Trevor broke his leg." And then the red light changes and the car speeds away. And we were like, "Oh God, Trevor broke his leg. We don't know him. But he definitely broke his leg storming the field." Anyway, moving on from that story time, of course, it's October. It is episode 77. 7, is an important number in numerology, that kind of thing. So hopefully this is going to be a really good episode. I'm really excited about it. But today we're talking about paranormal activity and tragedies. This is a good one. This is one I've had this in my pocket for a while. I've been waiting, of course, for spooky season to share this with you guys. And I just wrote it, and it's incredible. It is like such a good episode, I think. So buckle in, buckle up, buckle in, get ready. But first, while I've got your ear, before I forget, I want to remind you guys, please share the podcast with somebody this week. Share this episode on your Instagram story. Share it with, your friends who are also obsessed with ghosts like me. Whatever. Share it with somebody. because that's how we're going to grow. That's how we're going to grow our community that I'm so excited about having and building. And that's how the podcast is, gonna succeed. So if you could share with somebody, and if you could leave me a review on Apple Podcasts, if that's where you listen, that would be just over the moon incredible as well. And I thank you for that if you've done it already, and I thank you for that if you're doing it right now. Also, another side note, last one before I get into the episode, my mom, she calls me this morning and she's like, Elena, I just listened to the spooky documentary episode and I have to call you out on something. And oh my gosh, I'm going to get in trouble for saying the F word or something. I don't know. And she's like, you said that you're into all things spooky, but you wouldn't come home to live free of rent in my haunted office building. She and my dad and my uncle own these 2 historic buildings in downtown Barberville, Kentucky, and they have an office in them, a salon, and then a bunch of apartments. And she offered me, she was like, you can live there free of rent, whatever. But the kicker is that the buildings are haunted. They truly are. We've owned those buildings. Their office has been in those buildings since I was 5 years old. My god uncle used to own them. My parents and my uncle bought them from him. They're freaking haunted. Okay, they're wild. There's a male entity that we see in there. We hear him moving around, and multiple people have seen him. Okay, seen this man. He's a shadow figure, black man, like black, not like black skin, but like black, no features, a shadow, and with like a top hat. And then I have had experiences in there with hearing things that shouldn't have happened. And my grandmother lives in the building. She has had her own experiences. So it's wild. And she was like, you wouldn't come live in my haunted building. You said blah, 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 blah. I said, Karen, you need to keep in mind that the problem is not that I don't want to live in your haunted building. It's that I don't want to live in Barberville. Like, I don't want that. And she's like, oh, whatever. You don't want to live. So anyway, this one's for you, Mama. It is not that I don't want to live in your haunted building. I don't want to live there. But it's not because I'm scared of it. It's because I don't want to live in Barberville right now. Lord, get off my back. She was like, I gotta call you out. You said you like the spooky stuff. That don't mean I like living in spooky places. I don't. I've lived in a handful of spooky places. I have seen my share and I have heard my share, and I want no more shares of it. I will say that. That doesn't mean I don't like spooky movies and hearing about other people's stories, So that's what y'all are getting today. You're going to get some other people's stories, but we're going to talk about this whole phenomenon around. Did y'all like how my accent switched? We're going to talk about this whole phenomenon around tragedies, tragic events, major things happening in the world, and increases of paranormal activity. I am just super excited, like I said, to share this with you guys, because I think this is I truly think that this is a really real phenomenon, okay? And it's very well documented throughout history and throughout many different major catastrophes. But I'm going to hit on the past 100 years. And that really wasn't on purpose, that it really is the last 100 years, but it just works out that way. So go for us. So what inspired me, okay, was I started seeing these articles, these reports of increases of paranormal activity around COVID-19. And then I knew that this was a phenomenon otherwise. I knew that this was something that happens sometimes. But I didn't realize, I don't think, the full extent of it until I watched the Unsolved Mysteries episode about the spirits and the hauntings that came in the wake of the 2011 tsunami in Japan. And now, if you don't know, that tsunami, it started with a volcano erupting, turned into a tsunami, and then that is also what caused the Fukushima meltdown, right? So all of that goes together, in case you don't know, or in case you know about one of those things but didn't realize that they were connected. So all of those things go together. And that, like I said, that's really what inspired me to start learning even more about this. So I started doing some research, and I found this article from May 23rd, 2020, where an LA reporter writes about how there has been a massive increase in reports of possible hauntings at homes during lockdown. Now, this article talks about how, people are spending more time in their homes. They're hearing lots of sounds like pops and cracks and stuff like that they're not used to hearing. And it quotes Jason Hawes, and he's the host of Ghost Nation. And he's also the former host, one of the former stars of Ghost Hunters. If you were a psycho like me and watched every single episode of Ghost Hunters that there's ever been and were obsessed with them, you know who he is. He's the bald one, Jason. He is also the man behind the Atlantic Paranormal Society. And they've seen a massive jump in reports of, hey, I think my house is haunted. He's one of the people that people reach out to and contact because he is a professional in the paranormal space. Now, a week earlier, on May 15th of 2020, another article had come out reporting that paranormal researcher and former TV host John Tenney said that the number of calls he had started getting after lockdown restrictions went into place had doubled, if not increased by up to 5 times. Now, obviously, there's a lot of room for variance in that because it's not like a steady, he gets 5 times the amount of calls he usually did every single week. But, 2 to 5 times more is a lot. It's a lot. Now, Tenney goes on, he says that the reports he's been getting, because this one went into more detail. This one was an interview, went into more detail than the other article I looked at. He's getting reports of everything from the typical knocks and footsteps and that kind of thing to whispered voices coming from the TV that aren't, what's supposed to be there. And people even reported getting text messages from those who had already passed on. Now that's wild. That's wild. Now, Jason Hawes and Tenney, they agree on this, that most people don't, they actually agree on a lot of the things that they say in between these two articles, but they say that most people don't spend this much time in their homes. They're really not used to being home this much. They're bored. They're hearing things that they're not usually hearing, like pops and cracks and stuff like that. And they're also in a state of heightened emotional stress. So they're quick to jump and assume when they do hear these things that they're not familiar with. But, so even though they both kind of say, a lot of it's probably these things, Tenney does leave room for the fact that maybe some people have started noticing things that were there all along and that they were too distracted to notice before, like a ghosty ghost. Now, honestly, I do recommend that you read the interview that he did. And of course, as always, the link is in the blog for today's episode. But Tenney brings something up here that is going to carry us through into exactly what we're going to talk about today. He says that he observed a spike like this in 1999 during the Y2K, which if you don't know what that is and you just know Y2K as the early 2000s trending clothing, I'm really old. And also, I encourage you to go look up Y2K, like, crash, like 1999 Y2K, because that was wild. Apparently my dad was like, because my dad's always been a nerd. I mean, he's always a very prepared person. I'm not saying you're not, Pops. I'm just saying you're also a nerd. And I think you know that. I think you're aware. But anyway, my dad, like, apparently helped a bunch of people get their computers and their stuff ready in case Y2K did happen. It was basically, long story short, everybody thought that at the new millennium, 2000, and that when the computers switched over from 1999 to 2000, they thought that the computers weren't going to be able to handle that, and everything was going to crash, and we weren't going to be able to use anything computerized anymore. So, wild time. Anyway, they basically thought it was going to be like a crash computer virus, like blah, 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 blah. Anyway, Tenney also says that there was another spike around 9/11, which is absolutely true. Now, he then goes on to talk in this interview about how, it is this major time of stress, and it really does affect human psychology in one way or another. And it does. And there's a lot of these articles I read through, there's a lot of psychologists, psychiatrists, whatever, counselors, whatever, who are quoted talking about these things, talking about how, it could be XYZ, blah, blah, blah. But a lot of other people have noticed these spikes, these trends, and it can't all be explained away. Like, it can't. So this is something that we absolutely need to discuss. Now, since we are in the era of COVID-19, I want to share with you a story of a man who experienced the supernatural himself. Now, Michelle Horn was a beautiful woman with so much life in her and opportunity ahead of her and so much love in her life and in her heart. And unfortunately, she passed from COVID, from complications of COVID, after almost 10 years of marriage to her best friend in the world, Ian. After a long battle with COVID. And Ian was devastated, rightfully so. So one morning, not long after her death, Ian was driving to work, where he works as a radio DJ. And as he was driving down the road, he drives every morning, and it was also the last road that Michelle took to the hospital, the road that she rode on last in the world before she passed. He looks up, he's driving early in the morning, about 24 street lights on either side of the highway were purple, like little lavender orbs floating in the night sky. And Ian was overwhelmed. He said it was a message from Michelle, his beloved wife, because one, like I said, this was his daily drive and it was her last drive. 2, purple was her favorite color. And 3, that was even the color of the tie he wore at their wedding. So for Ian, he knew immediately that this was her, and he was just super overwhelmed and happy with the knowledge that she's sending him a sign that she's there with him, But here's the thing. The lights are still there, which I think is really awesome because it confirms his story. He actually called the city because he was like, why the hell are these street lights purple? Is there like some reason that they're purple? And the city was like, oh, it must be a batch of defective bulbs. We'll replace them sometime in the future. But what a coincidence. And, I think my little romantic heart, but also I truly do believe in the supernatural. I have to wonder if it still was her influencing that. If she made sure that defective batch of bulbs, or made sure that batch of bulbs that went in was defective, whatever. Even though it can be explained away to something tangible, it doesn't mean that she wasn't somehow a part of it from beyond. But the cool thing is, that wasn't the only experience that Ian had. So he saw cardinals around his backyard in the autumn, which is out of season for them. So that's what makes this poignant. And cardinals in tradition, in like common American folklore, cardinals appear when loved ones are near. That's what we say. And he has also heard her audibly call out to him on multiple occasions, so loudly that it like jolts him and startles him. It's woken him up before, like all kinds of stuff. He's like, you know what? You can tell me it was an auditory hallucination. I don't really care if you tell me that or not, because I heard it. Like, it wasn't in my head. I heard it. Wow. What a story, you know? So then we have Jamie Jackson in Pennsylvania. She lost her beloved favorite Aunt Pat after complications from COVID in the summer of 2020. Now, this was a super close relationship, like extra mom. Like, if you've ever seen me and my Aunt Juju together, it's this kind of thing. They're super close. So Jamie is understandably devastated when her Aunt Pat passes away, and especially so because she couldn't even be at the hospital to comfort her as she passed or to say goodbye. So then, about 7 months after Pat's death, Jamie's putting up Christmas decor, a lot of which had actually belonged to her aunt, when Jamie turns around to see a translucent figure of a petite woman who looked and was dressed quite like her Aunt Pat from behind, peering over into the box of Christmas decorations. Jamie froze, and then she ran. She ran into the other room, and she just cried. But she said she knows that that was her aunt, and that she's sure that her Aunt Pat is still visiting her and still with her here. Experiences like this have been happening all over the United States. Like I said, like tons of people are experiencing these kinds of things. But again, it's not just here, first of all, but it's not just now. Now, let's rewind real far back, 100 years or so, to the 1918 influenza epidemic, which, paired with the 1918 end of World War I, sparked a massive resurgence of spiritualism in the U.S. Now, if you don't know exactly what spiritualism is, definitely go Google that. But in short, spiritualism is, seances, Ouija boards, all of that. And it's kind of a religion unto itself. And it definitely was at that point in time as well. Like, it was very much its own situation. Like, you couldn't really at that point be a spiritualist and a Christian at the same time. Like, maybe people identified as that, but the institutions didn't want you to be that, right? Anyway, so seances, mediums, clairvoyance, Ouija boards, all of that wrapped up into spiritualism in an essence, in a very small nutshell. So one of the most famous proponents of the spiritualist movement was Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. He was huge into spiritualism, like huge. And this was largely because he had lost a son to complications of the flu, but that same son had also been wounded in the war, so like doubled up there. Arthur Conan Doyle lost a brother to the flu and a brother-in-law to the war. Now, you might know his name. I hope you do, because he is one of my favorite authors of all time. But he is also the creator of Sherlock Holmes, which is one of my favorite characters of all time. Now, Doyle went on to write, and so he wrote a ton about spiritualism, and he also did speaking tours around the United States, because that's where spiritualism was like the most massive. So he went on to write about an experience he had getting a visit from his son during a seance in 1919, where Doyle felt a strong hand on his head and a kiss on the forehead. And he said he knew it was his son. And he said, like, son, are you happy where you are? I just need to know that. And there was a long pause, and then there was a sigh. And he heard, yes, I am so happy. Now, Doyle went on to report more experiences of his own communication with the other side, which was absolutely something he was searching for. So it does taint the credibility just a smidge, I will say, because he wanted comfort and he wanted answers and he wanted that connection. But he also claimed to know of up to 24 different mothers who were in communication with their dead sons. And I think that's pretty impressive. That's a pretty impressive number if it's accurate. And frankly, I hope it is. I just think it's so interesting. Now, moving up a little bit, in the wake of 9/11, tons of people, and that is one of the United States and the world's biggest tragedies. It is a massive terrorist attack. So in the wake of the 9/11 attacks, tons and tons of people reported sightings of and even conversations with those who were lost. One woman, Lisa O'Brien, found her 4-year-old daughter JC, having a conversation with her daddy, whom she said, I can see him too. JC said that daddy was telling her knock-knock jokes, and JC could name off her daddy's co-workers and friends who had also died in the attack. They would all come visit her to say hi, but daddy especially. And a lot of these people, JC had never met in her tiny little baby life, but she knew their names. And she even looked at a group photo of her dad and some other guys, and she said, quote, "Those are the boys." Like, that's obviously what her dad called his friends. Those are the boys. He had told her about, these are my friends, these are the boys. She had seen them, seen their faces, and she knew when she looked at a picture of them that those were her dad's boys. Oh, wild. Bonnie McEnany, Lord, y'all, I can't read, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right. That's not a name I'm familiar with, so I truly am sorry. Bonnie McEnany's husband, Eamon, we're going to say Eamon, he had a sense of foreboding in the weeks building up to the attack. And on September 2nd, this is like super crazy, okay? On September 2nd, Bonnie says that they were all at a barbecue when Eamon had a full discussion with his brother about the World Trade Center being hit again. Now, for anyone who doesn't know or doesn't realize, the World Trade Center had been bombed once before in, I think, 1999. So he and his brother had a full discussion about how to best evacuate other people, like how he should guide people out, which way he should go in the event of another attack. This was 9 days before the attack. Had a discussion about how he should help people if there was another one. But for me, probably the most chilling part of this is that just in the few days before the attack, he came in one night and she was cooking and he told her, "You really need to work on being the disciplinarian with the children because," quote, "when I'm gone, it's going to be hard." He knew something was coming and he knew he didn't have long left. Then, the very morning of, he was in the shower getting ready for work and he had a vertigo attack. Now, if you don't know, vertigo is extreme dizziness, like crazy dizzy. This is the first time he'd had a vertigo attack in almost a year. And I truly wish he had taken that sign. Like, I truly do, because I think he would still be here. Or he would have been here for a lot longer. Bonnie went on to talk with his wife, Bonnie. She went on to talk with about 200 other people in the community of those who were directly affected by 9/11, who also had signs and premonitions before and after the attack, and visits from loved ones lost. She had enough testimonies that she wrote a book entitled Messages: Signs, Visits, and Premonitions from Loved Ones Lost on 9/11, which I obviously will link in the blog post. Another woman, Monica Eichen, this is just another one I really liked that I want to share with you guys before we move to the next disaster. Monica Eichen woke up one morning to see her husband glowing and smiling at her at the bottom of the bed. Just a, hey, I'm here with you kind of thing. And as soon as she said something to him, he was gone. But she saw him. Now, 10 years later, in 2011, a tsunami in Japan killed at least 20,000 people. And reports were so widespread across Ishinomaki, the affected area, that a book has been written and a documentary has been made. And so you guys have to watch the Unsolved Mysteries episode about this especially, okay? Like, you have to go watch it. But all of this about the reports of the confused spirits who wander around the city that they lived in because they're not quite sure that they're dead. They don't really know. I mean, people reported neighbors who died in the tsunami appearing outside their homes and sitting in puddles of water. Tons and tons of reports related, like that, tons related to water, okay? People reported toys of children who were killed in the tsunami, the toys lighting up and playing sounds in empty rooms of their home. Taxi drivers picked up passengers who wanted to be taken to homes that had been destroyed. And then the passenger disappeared before they arrived at the location, or just kind of got out of the car at the location and vanished into thin air in front of the driver's eyes. You know, that kind of thing. And also reports of like wet footprints. So we love that. One Buddhist priest who lives in the area, his name's Reverend Tao Kaneda. He became a sympathetic ear to many of the people who were going through extreme grief in the wake of the tsunamis, of course, because not only was this a natural disaster, but there were governmental and political and infrastructure things that kind of fell through and made things worse in some cases. So it's just a really hard situation, right? Like, if you want anything to compare it to, I would say maybe Hurricane Katrina, like if that gives you a little bit of perspective. So Reverend Kaneda became a sympathetic ear to a ton of the people who were grieving, and with that came a lot of stories of hauntings and the supernatural tied to those losses. A lot of people experienced disturbing dreams about those they lost, and some had comforting dreams. Some people saw figures on the beach where there were actually no people. And the ones who reported that were people who hadn't had losses of their own, but they were seeing ghostly figures on the beach where there was nobody actually there. And one man even told the Reverend that he kept seeing the eyes of those who died in the puddles that he passed on the street. He could see their eyes looking up at him from the puddles. Imagine how haunting, how terrible. He didn't even like leaving his house anymore because he saw those who passed all the time, every time he went down the street. It's super disturbing and super sad. So if you can and you are interested, I highly, highly recommend y'all go check out Netflix's Unsolved Mysteries episode on this, because it is incredible and it really does stick with you. I mean, I've been thinking about it for the past year, and it's just, it really sticks in your chest, right? But I think it's really, really important to note that these experiences don't just happen to people who are looking for them, who want that comfort and visitation. You know, like Conan Doyle, like some of the victims or the survivors of victims of COVID or the survivors of victims of 9/11. It's not just that. I think that some of those who experienced the tsunami are actually really good examples because a lot of them aren't particularly religious, they said. Japan is actually a rather secular country in a lot of ways today. It's not like, there's of course a lot of traditionalism, and there's the religions and the traditions are still very relevant, but it is rather secular. And you know, those people weren't like hoping for visitations or for confirmation in a religious sense. And for a lot of people, these kinds of experiences create some serious fractures in their established worldview, or it doesn't fit within their religious beliefs at all. So they refuse to recognize that these kinds of things happen to them or can happen at all. Some of the people who have these kinds of experiences have moved out of the grieving process and they have a shock visit, you know, that is just like, what the heck was that? And some people get visits from people that they don't want to see again. They get visits from people, this isn't necessarily in the case of the tsunami, but just in general, people get visits from people who wronged them or whom they wronged, and they don't want to see those people. And some people in Japan, like I said, saw spirits when they themselves didn't even know anyone who was killed. They didn't personally know anybody. So there was nobody like coming back to visit them, to comfort them. They were just seeing these things that were there. Crazy, that were there but weren't, you know. But these kinds of unwanted visits are actually especially present during war times. Which, if you didn't know, we've been in a wartime for 20 years, so that's cool. But this is what we're going to close on, okay? Because, I mean, just one more kind of absolute tragedy, war. A good amount of veterans, in the United States at least, report being visited by fallen comrades that they've lost, which is absolutely devastating for them and certainly not something that they want to relive. Other vets have reported being haunted by those they killed. In an iconic memoir, What It Is Like to Go to War, Carl Marlantes recalls that he was stalked by a soldier that he killed during the Vietnam War. He was stalked for years after he had come home. Carl says that he even had a private exorcism at 2 a.m. with a priest in a church. And as they prepared this exorcism, Carl wrote in the memoir that he saw the spirits of those he killed. Those aren't people you want to see. He saw the spirits of the comrades who died under his command. A lot of those probably aren't people he wanted to see either. That's a lot of trauma. And he even saw his late grandparents come to support him. He saw all of these spirits in that church during that exorcism. They were all there to watch. Like, what a vision of how thin the veil can be. The veil between worlds. I mean, how insane is that? And I very much do want to believe Mr. Marlantes. That is just, it's crazy. I'm going to link that book as well, of course. Absolutely insane. And he wrote that in his memoir. Like, that's not something he's ashamed of having experienced or trying to hide. That's something that he's like, I need people to know that these kinds of experiences happen. These exist. And these are ones that I didn't necessarily want to have. Oh, wow. Guys, tragedies across the centuries, throughout time, I mean, clearly they have an effect on the human psyche, but they also, I think, I don't know if it's, a communal consciousness thing, because I do think that we all are connected to a greater single consciousness. I think that's what God is we're all parts of the Creator, and the Creator is in each of us, and that kind of thing. And so we do have that connection to that collective consciousness that is, quote, God, the Creator. But I think also that there is a veil that they can kind of step through, or they can try at least to step through, to say, hey, we're over here, but we're still keeping an eye on you. And I just think it's so crazy how these times of great tragedy, they have this massive uptick in experiences because there's so many people trying to stick their hands through the veil to say, hey, don't forget about me, but also I'm here, don't worry. Or don't forget about me in a malicious way, but we don't want that. Anyway, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope that this was I hope it was a good spooky episode, a good spooky season episode. Truly, I do hope that you enjoyed it, and I thank you for being here. Make sure that you're following us wherever you listen, follow or subscribe. Make sure that you're following us on Instagram at I've Been Thinking Pod to get your weekly updates. And make sure that you go check out the Patreon if you have the means to subscribe. I would love that, because that is how I'm able to keep the podcast afloat, is from my Patreon subscribers. And for that, I thank those who are already subscribed. You all are beautiful and incredible, and I'm so thankful for you all as well. But yeah, go subscribe, follow, check out the Patreon, subscribe if you can, and I'll talk at y'all next week. Oh, and go share with somebody. Okay, I love you guys so much. Happy October 15th, Friday the 15th, and I will talk to y'all next week. Bye.
Hello, you sentient ball of stardust. My name is Casey Davis. I'm a therapist, and I'm an author of the book How to Keep House While Drowning, where I talk about ways to make it a little bit easier to take care of yourself when you're overwhelmed, stressed, have mental health issues, physical health issues, or maybe you're just in a hard season of life. Maybe you're looking for a place that you can come and listen to some practical advice. This is a podcast for all of the self-help rejects. We're going to talk about skills for survival and self-kindness. And I'm going to leave the pop psychology at the door. I promise not to tell you to meditate or to journal. We're just going to give you some really insightful conversations with hopefully some practical advice. So I don't believe you need to pick yourself up by the bootstraps. I don't want you to just try harder, and I don't believe that laziness exists. So join me over on Struggle Care, where we can find compassionate solutions that help us function a little bit better.
You probably know the feeling: sweaty, fast breathing, quick heart rate. That's a cortisol spike. It feels awful, and its imbalance is the cause of your anxiety. Rebalance Health's 3-part anxiety system helps address it at the root. Rebalance Health lozenges are natural and designed for optimal absorption, providing 24-hour relief. Live life fully without feeling like you're fighting for it. Get 50% off your first month with code CALM23 at rebalancehealth.com.